Intelligence gathering and field espionage were the most efficient ways to learn about, thwart, and destroy the plans and capabilities of one party or another during the Cold War and the arms race that dominated everything between the United States of America and the Soviet Union, and consequently between East and West. There are several tales of spies and intelligence agents who completed precise tasks successfully. Others paid the price for what they did with their life. Some of them gave their nations great services, while others helped foes and rivals get the means to stab their governments in the back and die traitors. The tale of Soviet spy Adolf Tolkachev, who worked for the CIA, is one of the most captivating tales in the espionage war that grew more intense throughout the Cold War. Additionally, he was the best spy for the Americans operating within the Soviet Union, and he gave them access to information that no other spy before him or since has had. For the benefit of governments or organizations, they gather and analyze sensitive information. They carry out covert operations, infiltration, and other forms of surveillance to obtain information about prospective threats or to their advantage. Because of the often secretive nature of their employment, it calls for extreme discretion and professionalism. They could work covertly or assume different identities. They need a high level of skill, training, and mental toughness for their work, which can be dangerous. Their practice frequently involves emotional deceit and manipulation. In one of the former Soviet Union's republics, Kazakhstan, Adolf Tolkachev was born in 1927. Tolkachev appeared to have had a childhood that was similar to that of most kids growing up in the Soviet Union during the reign of Joseph Stalin. As the Bolshevik Revolution's leaders fought for control, there was a lot of violence and animosity in the air. After completing his coursework, Tolkachev earned a diploma in electronics engineering. He was given a sensitive post in the Soviet Union's military business at the Scientific Research Institute for Radar, a monitoring gadget. This institute is producing equipment that will allow Soviet warplanes to outperform several American aircraft. Tolkachev first made contact with the CIA in early 1977. In Moscow, it occurred as he was pursuing vehicles bearing American officials' license plates. When he was able to get close to one of those cars, he tossed a piece of paper inside it, declaring his readiness to give the United States of America information that was of the utmost significance. He sent signals that the CIA meticulously picked up. Then the incident occurred that allowed his efforts to succeed. He initially met Robert Fulton, the director of the CIA's Moscow branch, at a Moscow gas station. After Tolkachev made 5 tries between January 1977 and February 1978, this amazing coincidence happened. For fear of stumbling into a trap the KGB might have planned for them, the Americans took their time dealing with Tolkachev. In the 5th attempt, the CIA appointed an officer who was fluent in the Russian language to communicate with him, and this officer was none other than John Gilcher, assistant to the head of its Moscow office. This meant that the director of the Central Intelligence Agency agreed to this operation. First contact was made with Tolkachev, whose name was recorded by the CIA as CK Sphere in the middle of 1978 before being changed to GT Vanquish. It had tiny cameras for making copies of papers. With additional apparatus, the Americans soon realized that their new Soviet informant was really providing them with very sensitive information. It was agreed that during face-to-face encounters with the CIA officer assigned to him, he would provide the paperwork and information the Americans requested. In the years 1978 to 1985, he interacted with 5 CIA agents. Tolkachev insisted that his work for the CIA wasn't done for financial gain. He said that his motive was revenge for what his wife's parents were subjected to by the apparatus of the Stalin regime. But later he started charging a lot of money for information. The majority of his information concerned the radars that were installed in several Soviet combat aircraft. He gave the Americans knowledge regarding the MiG-23 radar, one of the iconic pieces of Soviet Air Force equipment, that astounded them. He also disclosed top-secret details about the MiG-25, a reconnaissance aircraft, the Sukhoi 27, and the Ilyushin E-50. The most significant and in-depth information he gave was probably on the Soviet missile system R-23, 33, and 60. He also talked about the long-range S-300 missiles and other cutting-edge technology. Adolf Tolkachev made sure that none of his encounters with the CIA occurred in circumstances that could raise questions. But was he actually exercising all safety measures? There are concerns over the KGB's and other Soviet security services' ignorance of Tolkachev's interactions with the Americans. Some suggested ignoring it, while others said that the Soviet intelligence service was aware of what he was doing. How is it feasible that he repeatedly asked for sensitive documents so he could photograph them without raising any questions? According to certain articles, Adolf Tolkachev offered the CIA 150 picture books in his second encounter with the officer who was assigned to him after presenting 200 to them in his first. He carried on his work for around 7 years. He was coming up with his own strategies for providing Americans with the information they want. He had the impression that they had broken through the formidable defenses of the Soviet military aviation industry. A CIA agent was stopped by KGB men in 1985, and they transported him to the famous Lubyanka building, which served as both the KGB's headquarters and a prison. Equipment that showed the Americans' involvement in espionage was seized. Among other things, a camera was booked. The CIA officer was placed in prison, where he spent a short period, and then was released. At the same time, while Tolkachev was returning from the Moscow countryside when he was detained and taken prisoner by KGB men, it was unclear from the information if he had just met with a CIA officer. Tolkachev was detained and put to death. Was Tolkachev's mask dropped by the KGB? Why did it take 7 years? He was able to inform the Americans during this time so they could respond to any advancement in the military aircraft and missile defense industries. The most credible stories of Tolkachev's exposure, a former CIA operative who fled to Moscow to avoid being charged with treason. Edward Lee Howard, who worked in the 1970s, is his name. He was employed by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, and in a number of humanitarian organizations. Following Adolf Tolkachev's exposure and detention, the United States made the most of the crucial information he supplied. The Soviet Union was the United States and its allies' first military and political foe during the Cold War, when espionage had the final say, and this crucial information aided them technically and militarily. Tolkachev's leaks were offset by gains for the United States, estimated at billions of dollars. The spy, who claimed to desire to exact revenge on his wife's parents, was given the death penalty. He continued to be very keen to keep his home matters, his work, and his actions as a spy fully and entirely separate because he wanted to save his family all the follow-up. Concerning Adolf Tolkachev, today's intelligence agencies from Russia and the United States concur that he was the most dangerous spy during the Soviet era.